What's good, friends? Ebony Chappelle coming to you with something rejuvenating and also something blessed for your podcast listening and viewing pleasure. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of What's Good with Ebony Chappelle. Hey, friends. Hey, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the podcast. If this is your first time, welcome. If you are a frequent listener or a viewer, welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in. Want to remind you guys to like and subscribe, rate and review, comment, share episodes of the show if you feel so moved. Let me put my earbuds back in. And yeah, just let me know what you think. I am so excited to be coming to you guys with this episode today. So, right now, I am coming to you from a new location. I am in Colorado right now. I am in a really small town called Nederland, Colorado. And I'm here just to do some rejuvenation, do some re energizing towards this latter half of the year, and get my mind right for some of the things coming up in 2023. I've been doing some writing, I've been doing some meditating, some reading, and I got invited as part of a theologian in residence program that is put together by a Methodist church in Boulder, Colorado. So I feel so grateful and so honored to be here. And I'll tell you guys a little bit about the backstory to this. So I just want to take a moment to say thank you to God, the universe, and all the beautiful things that are in this planet and in this plane of existence for the gift of friendship. Friendship is the reason why I'm here right now. The pastor of the church is a new friend of mine, and I was invited through a really good friend of theirs, just off of a conversation. So I was sitting on their porch, my friend, I was sitting on their porch back home in Indy, and I was just talking about the fact that I felt like I was nearing burnout, honestly. That's the easiest way for me to sum up what my feelings were at the time. I felt like I was nearing burnout. I was overwhelmed, overextended, really frustrated with so many different things that were going on at the time. And then they told me about this beautiful place that they go to sometimes just to get themselves together. And I thought, yeah, that sounds so beautiful. I would love to experience something like that. And I told them, I was like, yeah, that sounds amazing. Within a couple of minutes, y'all, they were on the phone with their friend, who was the pastor here, and I was invited to come and visit and to really take in this beautiful space. So I'll show you guys a little bit of what it looks like so that you can see what I mean. It's breathtaking. So yeah, I've been up here for a few days, and it has just been a really powerful time, and I'm so grateful. And it's a perfect setup for the conversation today on the podcast. I am talking with Reverend Jeffrey A. Johnson II. If you are in the Indianapolis area, you're probably familiar with his dad, who is the longtime pastor of Eastern Star, which is a really big church in the city. So Jeffrey A. Johnson II recently became the pastor of Pilgrim Baptist Church in the city. So I'm so excited for him and his family. But he's someone that I just admire as a young person, a person of faith, but somebody that really exhibits their faith in an authentic way, in a relatable way. So I'm so grateful for his presence. I'm so grateful for his gift and grateful for our conversation today. So I don't want to belabor the point. I just want to jump right into it and hope that you hear something in this conversation that blesses you. So without further ado, let's jump into it with Reverend Jeffrey A. Johnson II.
I'm working on the PhD right now, so I'm like halfway in the program, which is still like 3 or 4 years left to go. So
Wow.
yeah, it's a lot, but we invest now to live the
Hmm.
life that we want to live later.
That is a really positive way to think about it.
Yeah.
Very positive way to think about it. So, yeah, we're definitely going to get into all of that. So, I like to start off these conversations by asking people what's good with them.
Mm.
So, it can be anything that is making you smile, that's bringing joy to your life right now. So, what's good with Jay Johnson?
What is good with me? Well, I'm learning how to balance spending time with myself and pouring into myself so that I could be more effective to the people who depend on me and who are in my circle of influence. So, one thing that has been good with me is that I just went to go to the movies the other day, and that may be very small to somebody, but that was huge to me. I love movies. I enjoy watching movies. And more recently, I haven't, obviously with the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
back in the swing of things, I haven't been to the movies in quite a long time. So I went to the movies with my bonus son, Dylan, and we,
Nice.
we pulled up to go see Jurassic Park, but we got there too late. And so we ended up watching the movie Lightyear, the origin story.
Oh, the Buzz Lightyear thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I thought it was. I'm a Toy Story fan. I'm more so of a fan of Woody than I am of Buzz.
I was
So
just going to say, Buzz
yeah,
was not my favorite.
yeah. I'm awaiting. I'm awaiting the Buzz. I mean, I'm awaiting the Woody origin story. I know we got a little bit
Yeah.
in Toy Story 2, but I need more. I need more in depth in that story.
Yes, I feel like it would be a fabulous story. I haven't seen Toy Story since I want to say 3. I
Yeah.
think that was the last one I watched and I didn't even watch the whole thing. And then was there another one after 3?
So there was a Toy Story 4, which
Okay.
probably wasn't their best one out of the franchise.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to branch off and dive into some of these characters a little bit more.
Isn't it amazing? First, I think it's really cool that you were able to take time and go to the movies because doing stuff like that is important.
Yeah.
Um, I went to the drive-in a lot during last year and the year before because it was like the safest thing to do. So I would just get done with work and then like get in my car and drive over to the drive-in and just have, that time to just kind of like get outside of all the, day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was just gonna say, I think it's so cool that something that came out when we were kids lasts long enough for your kids to see it and to see
Actually,
new versions of it. Isn't that wild?
I just think that's wild. A lot of nostalgia for sure. Like the first one came out in like '95. So
That's
what? I
crazy.
was what 7 maybe, 7 or 8. So yeah, to see it still have such an impact now, which it's incredible. And then to be able to pass it on to the kids, I'm like, oh, this is what we. I don't know what kids watch now. I mean, a lot of like,
I have no
my
idea.
little young kids watch a lot of YouTube, so they're not
I was
really.
just gonna say, yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
YouTube
Coco
and
Melon.
TikTok.
Yeah, so it's like a lot of like, Paw Patrol stuff. So they don't really get into like, the storytelling. Like, I mean, we
Hmm.
we grew up on Disney. You know what I'm saying? So we got a lot of stories to tell. So
Yeah.
it's cool to kind of still see them alive and like really like still having an impact on the culture.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really makes me smile. Um, so for people that are not familiar, um, tell them a little bit about yourself. I know you're a pastor and you're a dad and you're a PhD student, but how would
Yeah,
you introduce yourself to the folks?
it's a great question. It's like the hardest thing to talk about yourself. They say. Um,
Mhm.
I would describe myself as a uh, creator, the child of the creator, as a creative, as a I am a husband to Janelle. I am a father to Dylan, Kyle, and Jeffrey Allen and Jeremiah August. Um, I'm an associate pastor right now at Eastern Star Church, and I am a PhD student at CTS. The program is the African American Preaching and Sacred Rhetoric PhD program. Um, and so currently, I have a lot of things on my plate. Um,
Mhm.
but we are learning how to navigate with grace towards myself and towards others in the midst of, and I'm learning a lot about me in this process. I don't want to get all into it. I'm supposed to introduce myself. I'm doing a horrible job of doing
No,
that.
you're doing a great job of doing it. So yes, just keep going.
Yeah, yeah,
This is
yeah.
what podcasts are about.
Exactly. But first of all, let me just say I'm appreciative of you reaching out to me and allowing me to be a part of your podcast. And you do a lot of great work in the city and the community of Indianapolis. And so I'm grateful to be a part of what's good. You know. So
I appreciate that. I'm glad that you were able to make the time because you're someone that I definitely admire. And we got an opportunity to be on the radio together some years ago. And back then, we did say we were going to do it again. But of course, life goes on and we never got a chance to do it again.
that was
Yeah.
pandemic too. So then
Yes.
pandemic hit, the whole world,
It
everybody
jacked everything up.
it was crazy at that point. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad we were able to reconnect and make this happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. So with the ministry piece,
Yeah.
you're a part of a church and you also have like a legacy. You're a PK for people that don't know what that means. That means preacher's kid. So you come out of like a legacy of really excellent ministry work. Is that something that you always saw for yourself, or did you get older and realize, okay, this is kind of like a thing that I need to do?
I never thought that I would be preaching or pastoring. Obviously, when I look back on it, I kind of see like moments where I was kind of walking into it, but I didn't
Mhm.
think that I would be doing this for a living. Growing up in the house, kind of seeing my dad preach and pastor, I wasn't like, yeah, I want to be a pastor. Like I want to be a preacher. Like I wasn't that good. You know what I'm saying? Uh,
Mhm.
so
Especially seeing it up close, I'm sure.
yeah, just sitting up
Yeah.
close and like just the pressure of being the kid of the preacher and
Mhm.
the do's and don'ts. I'm not supposed to listen to certain music or wear my clothes a certain way or say
Yep.
certain words, and reminded of who my dad is all the time. Like I'm not.
Mhm. Yes, because your dad is like damn near famous, so it's like hard to go anywhere and not have people be
Yeah,
like, "Oh, there go Jeffrey Johnson's son." Like,
exactly.
yeah.
And so that's how they know us as, what I'm saying? Like, well, two of my brothers they're not in the city anymore, but like
Mhm.
even still today with kids of my own, I'll
Yeah.
still catch me out in the city. Ain't you Pastor Johnson's son? Like, I'm not even known as myself at this point. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I grew up, I didn't want to have anything to do with that. I went off to school. I went to a school called Payne College in Augusta, Georgia.
Mhm.
HBCU there in Georgia, and I just lived the proverbial college life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then it was, but in that moment though, I kind of felt a pull to preach, and so had a conversation with my dad, and he told me the best way to kind of dive into that and explore that was to go back to school. So I finished up at Payne in 2014. That following semester, I went to a school called the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta, Georgia.
Mhm.
Got my master's degree. And so from there, from then it was just on and popping. And at that point, it was just trying to figure out exactly how I wanted to express my call and the gift that I had. But
Mhm.
growing up early on, I did not want to do any of this. And so, like you said, the legacy that's been built by my dad, it's just kind of interesting to see. It's always it's a blessing and a challenge at the same time, like many things. Um,
Mhm.
so it's a blessing to work with my dad, work alongside, share the preaching responsibility at the church. But then on the flip side, I'm the PK working in my dad's church and the pressures and the challenges that come alongside that as well. So it's
Yeah.
definitely been a roller coaster experience for sure up until this point.
I can only imagine. And I have so many questions. So, one, when you can you describe what that initial inclination was that made you feel differently than you did when you were growing up and you were like, I don't want to have nothing to do with that. But
Yeah.
what was that initial like turning point that made you feel something like, huh, like
Mm.
I need to explore?
Man, you asked some great questions.
I kind of know what I'm doing a little bit.
Yeah. So I mean, like, so I kind of felt that in college. I kind of felt that pull in college, and while I was there, like I said, like I left Indianapolis with a place where everybody knew us and me,
Mhm.
our family, and so then to go down to Augusta, Georgia, in the south of the country, and not necessarily know nobody really knows me. So I'm just like, yo, I'm about to just, wow,
Mhm. Live your life.
like, So I dip and dabble in a couple things, and during that time, I wasn't going to church at all. I just
What was that like? Quick sidebar, squirrel moment. What was it like to not have to wake up
it's
early in the morning and go to
so
church?
good, you
I
didn't have
know.
no parents or nobody telling you it's time to go to church, but we're gonna leave at this time, get ready. Like, nah, none of that. Like, it was literally on me, uh, in with that piece, and so I
Mhm.
neglected that for like the first 2 years. I was down there, like I didn't want to go to nobody's church. I don't want to hear church. I don't want to ride past church. Like, I'm good on any of that. And so that was really like the starting point, honestly, of me and just kind of some of the dumb decisions I was making and connecting with
Mhm.
certain people that kind of impacted a lot of the choices that I was making at that time. But then, and that's when I began to understand the importance of knowing God and your relationship with God for yourself, and not through
Yes.
you know um, your parents or other authority figures or people around you. And so probably like 2 or 3 years into that college experience, I was like, you know what, I need to go to somebody's church. Like, it was just a lot of it was. I went to jail a couple times. Like,
Oh my goodness.
yeah, it was it was
Wow.
a crazy experience. And so like those
Yeah.
are moments where it's like God is on God is trying to tell me something or trying to grab my attention. So
Mhm.
what it is that God is trying to tell me. So, at that point I went to a church down there in Augusta, Georgia, Tabernacle Baptist Church, Pastor Charles Goodman Jr. He's still my guy there, and he really offered like mentorship and then opportunities for me to like, connect with the youth and the young adults there. I was growing in my own kind of like private, personal, devotional life,
Mhm.
and really just kind of cultivating my own theology and relationship with the church beyond my parents and my family. And it
Yeah.
was at that point where I was becoming more serious about my faith, where I, kind of felt the urge of like, I feel like God got something better for me or calling me to a higher place, a higher calling. So
Mhm.
I was actually like, I felt like I was like on a plane coming home, and I kind of like, I believe that I audibly heard the Lord say like, "Yeah, I want you to preach," and I don't still didn't want to do it at that point. Like, I don't want to preach. Like, who wants to be a preacher? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Listen, the people that actively want to do that, I always wonder, like, what's wrong with you?
exactly. That was
You
always
know?
in seminary. Like,
Yeah.
be afraid of those who wanted to do this. Like, it's not for the faint of heart. Like, it's not just a job where you can just clock out. It's like you become,
Mhm.
like, it's who you are. Your family's involved and affected by it. Like, your
Yeah.
everyday life. It's not something that you can just wake up and take off, put on, and at the end of the day take off. Like, it's a
Mhm.
that you got to become and live. And so, yeah, I didn't want to do that at all. Talked to my dad. I told my dad, like, yo, I feel like the Lord called me to preach, but I don't want to do it. And then his response was, well, don't do it. Like, his whole thing was like, if
Why
you,
can I literally hear that just, like, very point blank?
yeah, like that's who he is. He gonna keep it all the way real. So it's like, I guess from his perspective, it's like, if you feel like you can live your life and not do it, then go for it. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But that was something that I couldn't do. Like it kept calling me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So so I finally gave into it, and just trusted God, and now I'm here trying to do my thug thizzle.
You are doing it. You are definitely doing it. So, I just think that's such a beautiful testimony, and I wonder, like, when you reflect on your, like, prodigal moment or whatever, like, do you feel like it was necessary, and do you feel like you, like, gleaned a lot out of that that helped develop you as a person?
Yeah, definitely as a person, and even as a preacher too. I think
Yeah.
having those experiences kind of brings a little bit more power to you as a person, and then even as a communicator, right? Like
Mhm.
with the field in journalism or in any other field. Like I just feel like having those experiences, making decisions that you made that weren't the best ones, and living out the
Mhm.
consequences, it just kind of brings forth a certain wisdom about who you are as a person and being able to learn from those decisions. So for me, I feel like I had to go through that so that I could develop my own relationship with Christ. And
Mhm.
when I look back, seeing that Christ was there the whole time, navigating even through this stupidity. Um, and then, of course, like from the preaching side, just establishing that power and that testimony. Because I don't think a lot of people like to hear from people who ain't really gone through nothing or who ain't really made
No.
stupid decisions. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
I hear people that they can relate to. And so a lot of that, a lot of what I experienced at school in pain, and even beyond that, even while it's seminary, what I mean, even in seminary, still
Mhm.
in navigate and grow and mature. I think all of that grounds my approach to ministry and my preaching.
Absolutely. And I think about some things that I experienced and I feel like I didn't really like I knew God before, but I just felt like through certain experiences it's like I have an entirely new understanding
Yeah,
of who God is and God's love for me and a deeper appreciation for like grace and things like that because of stuff that I went through. And I'm like, had I not experienced that, like I don't know that it would be that pronounced for me.
yeah,
So yeah, I definitely feel that.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I think a
Yeah.
lot of times, like going through like difficulties and even whether it's difficulties that we put on ourselves or that life
Mhm.
just throws at us, like it's in those moments where God becomes real. Because it's like it's like a
Yeah.
old, like one of them old hymns that like if I've never gone through nothing, how would I know that God is real or something? That I just kind of mess
Mhm.
with him, but
I mean the message is there. I don't know which one that was, but the message is intact.
I just totally messed all that up. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what it is. Like, going through the valleys and going through, hell or going through pain or whatever, kind of like
Yeah.
puts us in a position to be open to the move of God. And if everything was always going well, it's like I wouldn't have to rely or depend on God. So
No.
for me in that moment, it's like, growing up, I didn't have no, from a good family, like that they provided for us. We didn't have to need anything. So
Mhm.
for them to say, go to church, this, Jesus, God, church, Bible, it's like, all right, cool. But then I go
Mhm.
off and have to figure out things on my own. All right, now the Lord is like, okay, bro. Now you are at the spot where I need you to be, so that you can
Yeah.
see who I can be for you. So
Mhm.
that was very powerful for me, and in this
Yeah.
whole process of me getting into ministry.
Yeah, I love it. You mentioned earlier about how going through school and added with your life experience and stuff, you were able to kind of form your own theology. Um, how would you define it to someone that just wondered, like, what's your perspective on God?
Man, that's a good question. So a lot of what I have thought God to be, kind of up until seminary, really was what
Mm-hmm.
other folk told me. Um, and Sunday school, children's church, Bible study, kind of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like this is what God is. This is what life is about. And not to say that I just completely, you know, forgot or like reject all of those things that I was taught growing up. But I think a lot of it now, uh, I was able to just get some foundation uh,
Mm-hmm.
under that. So a lot of it has to be unlearned, and then I was able to kind of glean from my educational pursuits and some of the things that I was exposed to. But to answer your question, how would I uh, explain my theology? Um, I would say that uh, as James Cone, who is a black,
Oh, yeah,
uh,
one of my favorites.
yeah, he's what they call a black theologian, but
Hmm.
he says that God is on the side of the oppressed, and I think that statement kind of undergirds my theology of who I believe God is. I think
Hmm.
God created uh, humanity. God created the universe, and God sent Jesus to save the universe after humanity turned their back on God, and and God established it. God sent Christ to win it back, and I believe that God did that. And whoever believes in that is saved. Now, how do we reflect that and express that? I think that's where like the differences lie with a lot of people. Uh,
Hmm.
me, the expression of your salvation or your spiritual connection with God has to be grounded in love. Like
Mm.
end of the day, if it's not rooted in love, then I don't think it's pointing back to God. Because
Yeah.
somewhere in that Bible it said that God is love, and
Hmm.
for us to see like the evangelicals who push Christianity, but then at the same time want to keep people oppressed, is like there's a disconnect that is there,
Hmm.
and you are mishandling scripture, mishandling Christ and Christianity to where people aren't experiencing the love of God. Instead, they are experiencing oppression and suppression. And so for my theology is said and rooted in the fact um, that love has to be um, that engine, that fuel that keeps us going, that points people back to God, points people back to Jesus, regardless of background, gender, sexuality. Like we can argue all day what the Bible says about what sin is, some of that stuff is like, yo, we're just talking at the side of our neck. Like, how do we
Hmm.
get people back connected to God through the love of God? I think that's what the role of the church should be. So I would say that would be kind of like the basis of my theology. And really, though, what really opened my eyes was in seminary. I went to it's called the Morehouse School of Religion. It's on the
Oh,
same
yeah.
campus as Clark and Spelman and Morehouse.
Hmm.
And so that was when I learned a lot about like black thought within the Bible, within the faith, within
Hmm.
a lot of the stuff that a lot of the stuff that, probably not so much now as, 20 years ago, whatever, but a lot of the stuff that we were learning in black churches was coming from the white theology and white
Yep.
people who framed God and Jesus and Scripture with this white supremacist framework, where
Hmm.
every the Bible is for white folk. White folk wrote the Bible. God is white. Christ is a American. It's like no, that's none of that is right. So seminary really opened my eyes to that, and I tried to infuse that within my communication of the gospel, because I think like for black people, like we got to be able to see ourselves in our
Hmm.
and see ourselves in our scripture. Like, what does it say to our young people, our kids growing up, the next generation, when they see or hear about Jesus, they see themselves, or when they see
Yeah.
characters in the Bible, they look like you. You know what I mean? I think that's a different to have that mindset would be a different way for them to receive it, as opposed to them thinking everybody white, and that just
Yeah.
completely off. So I said a mouthful, but I think I would say that my theology is rooted in James Cone. Um, God is on the side of the oppressed for sure.
Yeah. And I'm grateful for the fact that you're a person that is like leading in ministry and pastoring people, and you have that perspective and had those educational experiences,
Yeah,
because I think that it is and it should be mandatory, but we know that there's a lot that like anybody that wants to start a church or start a ministry, like you really just can't,
yeah,
honestly. And that learning is something that when I got older, I was exposed to more people that had that type of experience,
right.
and they were able to help me understand how the gospel was relatable to my life, because as a black woman and someone that aligns with like womanist thought and things like that, and very much deeply rooted in Black liberation thought processes. I got to a point when I got a little older that I was like, I don't know how this is relevant to me because of how it had been framed within the church experience. And it was a friend of mine who's in ministry too, Nick, and he had me read a James Cone book because we were in church together. And I was like, I was starting to do like stuff in ministry at the time. I was like, I'm really having a problem with like this. Like, how can I make it relevant to me, giving the way that I think and the way that I understand the world or whatever? And they're like, well, read this and this will help you. And it did. And I just think it's so powerful because I think of so many different things like, um, I think about there was this passage in The Color Purple where Alice Walker, and I think it was Suge who might have been saying this, Suge Avery in the book was talking about how the oppressor, and in this instance, white supremacy, would have you to be so warped in your mind to think that that is the ultimate. Because if you believe God is white and you turn on the radio and it's like you constantly hear white voices, and you go to make your breakfast and it's a white man on the front of the, box of oatmeal, like it
Right.
warps your mind into thinking like that. So it does, instill a certain level of inferiority and things like that in an already oppressed people. So
Yeah.
I just think it is incredibly, incredibly important that you, as a person that is helping to like shepherd people's spirits and whatnot, like have that kind of thought and that type of education, because we need it badly. Like,
Yeah.
Black people are, we have always experienced like really challenging things in this country, and we're in a point now where there's more that we're going to have to overcome. And the Black church, like, what I love when people refer to the Black church as a she. And I love when people refer to God as a she. But anyways, that's a little squirrel moment.
Mm.
But the Black church in general, I just think about like how, what it meant back in the day, and what opportunities, and I'm not gonna ask you to grade the church or nothing like that, but like, I'm curious from your perspective, like, what opportunities do you think exist to really lean into that sort of thinking to help us become liberated in the space that we're living in now?
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to say a couple of things. One, when you talked about, James Cone and this whole Black liberation theology,
Mhm.
that really opened the door for other uh, ways of thinking when it comes to theology, because uh, obviously, when we talk about Black people being oppressed, then we turn around and oppress each other. And
Listen, and then oppress other people. It's like, why are we doing that?
you know what it feels like, so
Yeah.
so when James Cone came through and was like, nah, like, there is a God who cares about Black people. Like, the Word became flesh and
Mhm.
dwelt in poverty. Like, He knows what it feels like to be an oppressed person. And so when he said that, then that opened the door to what you talked about, womanism. That opened the
Mhm.
door to the LGBTQIA. There's a whole theology centered in on that. And so all of these other kind of thought processes from outsiders or from the margins, they come in and they have a voice to what they believe God is to be and God is to them. And so I think that is
Mhm.
very powerful and important when you talk about, the Black church and moving forward, is just kind of being open to having conversations with people from different experiences and different backgrounds, and not quick to say the Bible say that to a people who don't know what the Bible is. You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
how do we have those conversations and be open and say that the God that we serve created everybody, and there's a purpose that all of us, have to be fulfilled in Christ. And so one of the ways I think that is very important is um, being able to share Black history in the church, um,
Mm.
and the history that comes from the Bible. Dr. Darren Williams, he's a pastor here in the city, and he got a whole book called "The Bible is Black History." And so,
Mm.
like, being able to have, like, we had Sunday school back when I was a kid. Beyond that, they would have BYU, basically how to teach kids
Mhm.
is, like how we got to have classes sitting around Black history through the lens of the Bible, through the lens of being a believer. I think that would be very vital. And then also at the same time is like, how do we create a space for for people who've often been hurt by the church, whether it's black
Mhm.
women, whether it's the LGBTQIA, whether it's people who've been neglected by the church, like people who've gone through divorces and things like that. Like, how do we create space
Mhm.
in our faith community where nobody feels neglected and we're all, going through this process together, progressing to the place that God has for us? Because a lot of times, people who've been in church or, for a while like to sit on that high horse, uh,
Mhm.
self-righteous, like they ain't never, committed a sin. And so I think it's important that the church remains open to having conversation. Now, there is the truth that comes out of the scripture that I feel like should be the standard. Like, if we can agree that what, the truth that comes out of the scriptures is the standard, then we can have that, we can have that conversation as to what that truth is and how we express that truth.
Mhm.
A lot of times the church has been so closed off, that people have been completely turned off
Yeah.
to the church, to the institution, and I think that the church still has some things to offer to the culture and to
Mhm.
society as a whole.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I wonder, do you think that it is necessary and or appropriate for the Black church to be, like, actively involved in, um, activism and, like, protest demonstrations and things like that? Um, yeah, I'm just curious about your thoughts on it.
Yeah, most definitely. I think if the church ain't doing that, then what are we doing? Uh,
Mm,
we're just kind of a social club, uh, separating ourselves from the real world.
yeah.
And we talk about the black church. The black church was birthed in slavery. Like,
Mhm.
I think a lot of times we forget that. Like, with all like the mega church culture and celebrity pastors, and I was like, yo,
Mm,
like we was birthed in oppression. Like, even like
yeah.
not even the black church, just the church in general. Like, you go back to scripture,
Mhm.
you read those stories. Like, all of those stories that we find in scripture emerged out of a context of oppression, whether the person
Yeah.
writing it or whoever they were writing to were an oppressed.
Mhm. Yep,
And
even Protestantism. I pronounced that
exactly,
wrong, but you know what I mean.
yeah,
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 like, that
like,
was birthed out of, like, combating the
yes,
power structure at the time.
yes,
Yeah.
being rejected from
Yeah.
the Catholic brothers and sisters. So they're like, yo, you know what, we
Mhm.
gonna start our own thing and do our own thing. So, like, whatever context of the church comes to mind,
Yeah.
whatever that is, it came out of a place of oppression. And so, especially for
Mhm.
black people, it's like, how can we emerge from a context of oppression and then, like, neglect the oppression that continues to exist? Like, there,
Yeah.
the church has to lead in that effort of social activism, community development, community organizing, whether that's through the protests, whether that's while sitting down with political officials. Like,
Mhm.
there's always there needs to be a space within the context of the black church for those type of movements, because I mean, Jesus puts it this way, like, you know, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you gave me clothes. When I was in prison, you came to see about me. And they was like, yo, when did we do that? When did we come give you food when you were hungry? When did we give you clothes? When did we come visit you when you were in prison? And Christ is like, when you done it to the least of these, you done it also
Mhm.
unto me. And it wasn't just in his words, it was in his actions. He was sitting down with women. He was having conversations with lepers and, what the Pharisees thought were sinners. And so to
Mhm.
see Christ moving through the streets, reaching out to people who've been labeled as outsiders and misfits, like, that's what we have been called to do. And so
Yeah.
when the church is not doing that, that's when we are operating outside of God's will for the life of the church. But when we are doing that, that's where the church is at its height. So, like, you talk about the
Yeah.
civil rights movement, even before that, even with Nat Turner and
Mhm.
the legacy that the black church has established from slavery has always been rooted in fighting back, organizing, reaching out, making sure that other folk who have been neglected have their needs met. And so I think that is the major priority for the church. Like that to me is like the social expression of the spiritual connection that we have with God, um,
Yeah.
meeting the needs of other people who have been marginalized.
Absolutely. And I love what you're saying about like living into the truth of what the church's history has been. I was just listening to something recently, and it might have been church last Sunday. Because Pastor has really been on it, Reverend Janae has
Yeah,
really been on it recently, but thinking about the fact that the gospel was first carried by a woman,
yeah,
like that was the first person that went out to share the gospel in the world, and where things are now, like on a mainstream scale, like it's so frustrating. But I love the fact that there exist still examples of people that are trying to uphold that standard and push it forward. You were talking about the celebrity pastor thing, and somebody made a post the other day and they were like, I don't need to see your pastor hopping in and out of whips on Instagram. Like, I don't need to see a video of that. And
yeah,
I was just like, who is doing that? And then I literally saw it on my timeline, like right after that. And I was like, you know what?
yeah.
I'm so done with y'all. I'm done with y'all. And you have a presence on social media, but it's very interesting the way that you use it.
Mm.
Um, I love the
That's because I ain't got
funny.
no whips.
You said because you have what?
I ain't got no whip stop out of. That's why I did.
Listen, and even if you did, I feel like you would have enough sense not to do it.
Yeah, for sure, for
I
sure.
just feel like you wouldn't do that. But the way that you use it is like there's a message, and then you also like really tap into the humor, the deep wells of humor that exist in the Black church.
Mm.
And I just want to know, how does that play into things? Like, did you always feel comfortable
Mm.
expressing your humorous side? Like, where does that come from?
Man, that's good. I since I began this journey in ministry, I've always tried to include this creative side that I feel like I have. Like before I
Hmm.
was preaching, I was, rapping, doing poetry and spoken word.
I did not know about the rapping. I feel like there are so many just things that are
Yeah,
popping up, like the
yeah, like
jail thing and the rapping. I'm like, hold on now.
I feel like the college experience is its own podcast. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the whole thing.
Yes, we'll have to deconstruct if like discovering Jay Johnson, like, or something. Yeah.
But yeah, so early, I was a kid, like as a teenager, my brother, my cousin, and myself, we were a part of this rap group called the JC Squad, and we were
Okay, y'all
going.
were gospel rappers.
Yeah, we were gospel. We was going on. We went on tour. We was going to different cities, and we took that 50 Cent song in the club and we flipped it to in the church. Like
Wow. Oh
we was
my God, is this on YouTube or anything? I need to see
out.
this.
This is pre YouTube, so I'm grateful that
Don't
it's
let
out
me
on
find a link somewhere.
YouTube. So,
Oh
yeah,
man.
I was, I've always tried to like, express myself creatively. So when I felt like I got
Mhm.
called to preach, I thought that I had to kind of like make a decision on like, do I have to, can I still be creative or and I always thought preaching was like a certain way that you had to preach. But
Mhm.
going to
Mhm.
seminary and now part of this PhD program and just continuing to be who I am, like I've come to discover like preaching is beyond the pulpit. In fact, some of the best preaching is beyond the pulpit, beyond the four walls.
Mhm.
And so whether that's, like you started talking about social media, whether that's using music or using poetry, which is such a like a creative legacy in the Black community when it comes to poetry,
Mhm.
the use of words in general. But then as I'm studying preaching in this PhD program, it's like there's so many preachers in our history that were so poetic and creative. And then you talk about women in ministry, like Black women in ministry, they had to be creative because there was no space for them in the pulpit. So if
Mhm.
you denied them space in the pulpit, they're like, okay, I'm gonna go write a book, or I'm gonna go write
Yep.
poetry, I'm gonna go sing a song. And it's like just because I'm not
Mhm.
standing in the pulpit with this Bible preaching or speaking behind this desk doesn't mean I ain't preaching. So I
Absolutely.
had to learn how to redefine what preaching is, and figure out a way to give people the medicine with the candy, in a sense.
Mhm.
So for me, I think humor is definitely a great creative, uh, communicative tool, um, to communicate your message. And so when you talk about humor, I think a lot of times it's often neglected in church. I think sometimes we can become so serious and solemn and retrospective that we forget to have fun. And we
Mhm.
forget that, Jesus said, I came to give you life and life more abundantly. And oftentimes we just continue to think about our pains and difficulties, that we don't experience the joys that come with the Christian life. And so it's like, yo, we at some point we got to have fun. So right now I'm actually,
Mhm.
um, as a part of my program, my PhD program, I think I've landed on what my dissertation, or my final project will probably consist of, and that is
Mhm.
the role of humor in Black preaching. And so
Mm.
I am about to embark on an independent study with Dr. Frank Thomas, who started the program at CTS, and we're going to look at this idea of humor in Black preaching, and the role that humor plays when it comes to just communication in general. So I'm not
Yeah.
just looking at preachers; I'm also looking at comedians, like
I
a
was just
Dave.
gonna say, yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
they.
perfect alignment there. Chris Rock actually said that he watched when he was trying to develop his stage presence, he watched a lot of Black preachers to understand his blocking and his like punching in of certain like lines and stuff like that. So yeah, this is perfect.
Yeah, it's a great parallel. Like when you think of stand up and preaching. It's like it's one
Mhm.
person, microphone, they on stage talking to people. It's so many different parallels. Whether it's like the flow, the concept, the storytelling, and so like that's what I'm really beginning to study, and then just trying to like within the scholarship that I'm getting in, I want to try to use it. Well, what good is it to
Mhm.
get the information if you're not gonna use it? So more recently, I've just been trying to be more intentional with using not just humor, but then also culture. Like I think
Mhm.
God is always God. Like we talked about the Bible saying about Christ is the Word made flesh, and so that's like one of my favorite scriptures because it just talks about how, to me, it just speaks on how God is moving within the culture. And a lot of times we miss out on God because we ain't looking for God. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
uh, when I'm scrolling through Instagram, I'll just see a post and then like a sermon will come to my mind and I'll just flip
Yep.
it. And so like whether it's if Kevin on stage talks about this in his master class, about like taking content that's going viral and then putting your
Mhm.
spin. So that's kind of been my angle with social media when you know, I'm kind of like a bipolar with social media. I don't know how you kind of navigate it, but like, like I was going in, I'll go hard for like a good 2-3 months, and then like
Mhm.
I'll come off and like, yeah, I need a moment to kind of just not
Yeah.
be on. So
Mhm.
I'm still trying to figure out my pattern of consistency, but yeah, I think that humor, social media, and the culture thing, for me, has been very effective and impactful. Not just in social media presence, but even in the pulpit, being able to
Yeah.
pull different stories and quotes and songs, to communicate the gospel is definitely something that I try to do on an ongoing basis. And because what you talked about though with that preacher, hopping out the whip and showcasing that,
Mhm.
uh, I think one of the reasons, maybe I don't know why they would do that, is to be, kind of like relatable to the culture.
I
You
can
know what I
see
mean?
that. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think they're missing now. Don't get me wrong. I think they're missing it when it comes to this. But I think that's how they're.
Agreed.
You know what I mean? Like when you see a rapper or you see an actor or or somebody like showcasing the things that they
Mhm.
have. So now I guess like as the preacher trying to engage that same audience, they kind of want to showcase that they're cool, that they, you know what I'm saying, that they
Mhm.
got swag or whatever it is. Uh, but it's like that. I don't think people look for that with their preachers. Like, like I don't think
No.
for the same thing they look at a rapper for, they look at a preacher for. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I would hope not, but I think that there is a certain avenue where people are they do gravitate toward that because it's more about the personality as
yeah,
opposed to like the substance because they're not interested in that. It's like, oh, I fool with him because he do this, he do that, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, so what does that have to do with anything?
yeah, but can he
But
preach though? Yeah,
yeah, can he preach? No. No. And there's a specific person I'm thinking of, but I'm not gonna say their name because I do
yeah,
not want this to be about them. But I'm like, but they can do a skit though. They can do a
yeah,
hell of a skit,
yeah.
a hell
They
of
do a
a
lot.
production.
Yeah,
Where is the substance?
yeah, and that's the thing,
Missing.
right? That's the balance, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
this whole idea of like, the argument is like, well, does preacher need rhetoric? Like this kind of sense of like persuasion. Like, does the gospel need, the poetic or the storytelling or like these other forms of the humor? Does it need that? Not
Mm,
necessarily if there's power in the
yeah.
gospel, but at the same time,
Hmm.
you're communicating to a certain people and culture who's been
Yeah.
saturated with entertainment. So it's like I can't not have some form of, humor or rhetoric or entertainment, not to entertain, but to grab the
Hmm.
attention. So it's like I'm gonna include. I'm all for substance, like that's all.
Yeah.
But it's like substance needs a little something, like it needs a little something so that people can
Hmm.
receive it. But that's when
Yeah.
you're like, when those people that we talk about kind of overdo it. You know what I mean? Like you don't want
Hmm.
to overshadow the gospel or overshadow the message with your own personality or foolishness that takes away from what we're really trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you think about being sensitive to the people, because we are in a time where there's people that, can't eat. They don't have access to health care. We're living in a housing crisis, like coming up on a recession. So it's
Mm,
like, how how is it appropriate then, especially in the black church, to be like, look at my wealth
right.
and people are perishing. It's like there's also like a level of tone deafness that comes
Mm,
along with it. But
mm,
I just feel like you bring up so many excellent points about utilizing those things to be relatable to people in terms of like the humor and the different references and stuff like that. I just think is really beautiful. And
mm,
there was something I was gonna say about that, but I done lost my train of thought.
yeah.
Um,
As you think about that,
I'm sure it'll come back. Yeah.
another piece that's important though, is like the storytelling behind like filming or plays or
Yeah.
like movies. And I think like the
Mhm.
faith community, that's what they call, like certain films now that kind of point people to God or about the church. Like a lot
Mhm.
of the about the church is like it's a turn off for me because it's like over dramatic, or it's
Yes.
like, or it focuses in a lot about church hurt, or like, or the pastor done slept with so many women now,
Child,
and
there's
or
80,000 movies like that, and I'm like, I really want y'all to stop. Leave it alone.
crazy. Like there's no other angle that we can get from the church. Like where's the comedy? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or even like a horror. I would love to see like a horror film regarding the church. You know what I mean? I don't know. Like,
Mhm.
so for me, I love to like to push the envelope, to get creative, and to just kind of, because I think the church has so many. The black church especially has so many stories that we can
Yeah.
tell, beyond the
Mhm.
pulpit, that point people to God. Because a lot of people, people learn differently and receive information differently. So you
Mhm.
and I can probably sit in the church and listen to a 35 minute sermon and be
Mhm.
cool. Somebody else that may need like a 5 minute short film, or
Yeah.
or a poem or something that will ignite something within them to do something
Mhm.
positive. So I think again, like the church has to be open to other forms of communicating.
Mhm. Absolutely. And it's a good point for me to like give Kev on stage his flowers because I'm going through the master class right now too.
Yeah.
Um, and I just think it is amazing how people like him and like your, referencing and being able to, put out through your form of ministry to like tap into the wealth that exists there because there is so much. I mean, there's like literally like endless levels of like things to pull from to connect people because
Mhm.
growing up in church myself, like there are so many things that I still tap into this day that came from that experience.
Most
Like
definitely.
that was the first place where you learn how to like do public speaking and stuff
That
like that, be able to put complete thoughts together, like because there was nothing but space and opportunity to try that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would love to see more of that
yeah,
highlighted for
yeah,
sure.
for sure. And that's one of the things like, it's always like if I was the pastor, type stuff. I have my own church. But I think I would definitely put an emphasis on that creative piece because I think like
Hmm.
now more than ever, like that's what's needed. That's what's
Yeah.
happening. And if we as a church is not, if we're not in that space,
Hmm.
debating or like kind of combating the foolishness, um,
Yeah.
we're missing out on the whole generation, on the whole audience that needs Jesus in a new way.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this has been fabulous. Just such a great conversation. As we wrap up, what are some things that you're looking forward to or that you are just spending time with right now that are like really top of mind for you? Just like, yeah, some final thoughts.
Yeah, sure. Some things that I'm working on. I'm in school and I'm working on this piece
Hmm.
about humor uh,
Yeah.
in black preaching, but I'm also working on the prophetic preaching of Dave Chappelle and how Dave
Mm.
yeah, how Dave Chappelle uses humor to communicate truths. A
Mhm.
lot of it is related to, systemic oppression and racism, and just kind of sheds light on that in in a humorous way. Um,
Mhm.
Again, I'm in this independent study that I'm very very excited about, and hopefully that'll kind of lay the foundation for me in my final project. But I
Mhm.
got a long way to go with that whole piece. But currently, I'm excited about challenging myself on communicating the gospel in new, fresh ways. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm working on like a children's book. Work,
Nice.
yeah, a couple of scripts that I want to kind of shop around with some friends of mine.
Mhm. For stage or film
Uh,
or TV.
uh, I would say stage and TV.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, yeah, stage and TV. And then also um, being creative in my presentation of the gospel within the pulpit, and
Mhm.
challenging the audience because right now, at Eastern Star Church, we just kind of reintegrated back into our church. So
Yeah.
a lot of the people that are attending are, been in church for a while, been a part of Eastern Star Church for a while. So
Mhm.
they're kind of already saved, already know who Jesus is in a sense. So I want
Yeah.
to be able to challenge them and their listening to this past Sunday I preached a sermon called "You Won't Break My Soul," and I broke
Oh,
down
yes.
Beyonce's song from a scripture out of Second Corinthians, and so being able to clash both the scripture and the culture, to point this new generation to Jesus always excites me. And so I'm always
Mhm.
trying to think of new, fresh, and idea way, new, fresh ideas and different ways to do just that. So that's always exciting, and that's always good on this end. So that's what I'm excited about.
That is awesome. I love that. So I'm gonna have to go back and listen to your sermon, because that song has been on like over replay in my life.
Definitely.
So yeah, definitely gonna have to give that a listen. There's another song. So I was on a call with some girlfriends. We have a mastermind group
Mm.
once a month. So I was on a call with them, and one of them said that they have been listening to "Break My Soul" and "Make It Happen" by Mariah Carey, like back to back. And
Mm.
I said I forgot about "Make It Happen," so I went back and listened to that, and I was like, okay, this is lit. So
Yeah,
add that to your playlist at
yeah, I'm
some
gonna have to add it
point.
to my playlist for
Yes,
sure.
because yeah, Mariah, I just think in general, like she has found ways to even infuse like Christ in her music throughout the years, like in various ways. And that's one of them. I'm just like, okay, she was preaching.
Yeah,
Wait, and that was on her very first album. So
maybe preaching
yeah,
low key. You just gotta listen. Some of the, like
for sure.
a lot of these songs got a lot of preaching in it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it's to a point you made earlier, just to bring it back full circle. It's about what you're looking for. Like if you are constantly looking to hear from God, like you're going to see it every single where you go. Like
right.
everything is going to be an opportunity to hear from Him. So
That's right.
that's amazing. That's amazing. So how can people keep up with you and learn more about Jay Johnson?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram. Okay, at underscore preach doc. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
like on Instagram. That's pretty much the only platform that I'm on right now.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I were talking about starting up our podcast again called Love on Purpose. So we were
Oh, nice.
when we got married, everybody got the hashtag. You know what I'm saying? At the wedding.
Yes, the wedding hashtags. Mm-hmm.
So our hashtag was Love on Purpose, and so the idea with that is believing that when God places purpose in the individual, God will also place some people around them to partner up with, to pursue that purpose. And so even in
Yeah.
the context of a marriage, it could be friends, it could be business colleagues, it could be neighbors, like who are those partners that God has placed in your life to pursue purpose. And so we were doing
Mm-hmm.
that early on in our marriage. We're married almost, it will be 4 years in September. Since then, we've had two.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Since then, we had two kids in a PhD program, so we've been completely like not trying to do that. So now I'll put it on her. Like if you produce it, I'll come and talk. Like I just want to talk. That's all I want to do.
Lord.
I want to do it. So that's what we're working on right now as well.
Yeah.
So definitely excited about that. So, but right now I'm just currently on Instagram and hoping to get back on YouTube and those things. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Continue to push the message of Jesus Christ and that people can find hope and purpose in this life.
Awesome. Well, thank you again,
Thank
Preach
you.
Doc,
Thank you.
for a fabulous conversation. And I just look forward to seeing all the great things that are to come.
I really appreciate it. Thanks again for having me.
All right. Thank you again, Reverend, for such a beautiful conversation. I hope to come and visit the church soon and just to hear you preach on a Sunday in person. So, again, congratulations to him and his family for this beautiful, beautiful gift. Again, thank you all for tuning in. Remember to like and subscribe, rate and review, comment, like, share, do all that stuff. You can keep up with me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Ebony the Writer. You can also check me out online at ebonychappelle.com. As always, have a great time and a positive life, y'all. Peace.